Could we have those lights turned out up here, please?
We like to see you, and I can't see you.
A disclaimer right off right the very front. It's been a couple of years ago, but I don't know. Rossie was counseling someone on the phone, and I don't sit there and listen to her counsel people on the phone, but the person was speaking of their husband, and I just happened to walk by there, and Rossie said, "Well, Ronnie's not the perfect husband." And if you wonder what I thought of that, then I thought, well, she's not the perfect wife either. And that's true. That's true. I wasn't shocked. I was kind of shocked she said that, but I already knew that to be true. And when you really think about it, I said she's not the perfect wife. She's my wife, and I'm thankful for her. And we've been through a lot of things together. But, my interpretation of a perfect wife might be different than other men in here, Some people's interpretation of a perfect wife might be a slave that did everything. I gave up on that years ago. That's not going to happen. And I don't want it to, I don't want her to be my slave. But she's been a good wife. And I have faith that she's going to continue to be a good wife. But neither one of us are perfect, so I just wanted to put that right out in the very front that we're not perfect. And what we've come through, what our view, where we're coming through and speaking of the home and especially the marriage, is we don't believe that you can separate growth as a Christian and growth as a Christian husband and wife. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from the very beginning and tell our testimony and tell some of the things, not all of them. We're going to try to be brief, maybe 2 or 3 hours, but we're going to tell a few things that we felt the Lord has brought us through. And during the times we didn't like it much, but looking back, we can see that He was maturing us. That the Lord matures you as a Christian through the things that you go through, And so, and from the very start, I'm going to share just a couple. I've said that 2 or 3 times, but that we learned about marriage, that we've through the years. Brother Parrish has taught us quite a bit of this, and one thing, and other people and other things that we've come across. But one of the things is we went to a marriage seminar years ago. This when we were we were raised in the Church of Christ, or I was, by the way. And that marriage relationship is not a 50-50 deal. Sometimes I have a bad, 6 months, and she has to step in and do more than her half. Understand what I'm saying? In some ways, it's the other way around. So it's not necessarily a 50-50, or like you give 50 and I give 50. Sometimes one has to give 100, almost 100, because we've gone through things together. We've gone through things as individuals. And another thing that and Brother Parrish, you taught us this years ago, that one of the root causes of marriage problems is selfishness on one side or the other. More, mine, I want it my way. I want you to be my slave. I want to, understand what I'm saying? Yeah, it's all about me. And another thing that we've learned, Brother Parrish, you taught us this also, is to make Jesus your Lord, and everything else will eventually fall in place. It's not instantly. We started off very rough. We're going to tell a few of the details. And we were started off with a very rough relationship as a marriage couple. But and another thing that I've felt that I've been taught is that make Jesus Christ your Lord, and make, as far as I'm concerned, my wife my best friend. I don't have, men or women, I don't have a better friend than this one sitting here. And when we first got together, we didn't talk very much. We do. I did, yeah. I didn't get a chance. but we do now. You know, we talk quite a bit, and I'm real hard to open up and share my feelings. That's a personality thing, but we do a lot more than we did, than we used to. I felt years ago also that the Lord spoke to me one time, and I felt He told me if I wanted to be a servant of His, that I needed to be teachable and have a heart towards Him. If I had a heart towards Him, He could take me through some things and deal with me and actually break me. And if I had a heart towards Him, I wouldn't run away, but I would stay with Him, and He could rebuild me, renew my mind and rebuild my attitudes. And I believe that the Lord has done this, and He's continuing to do this. Like I said, we're not perfect. I guess we won't be perfect till we're in heaven. But anyway, so we're just going to start out, and we're just going to give our testimonies before we came to the Lord, and Rossie's going to start first.
We're wanting this tonight to be an encouragement. We hope this is an encouraging word. That's what we want to be, because we've been through some things, and God's been faithful. So those are the two things. We want you to be encouraged and know that God is faithful. Okay. I wasn't brought up in church or anything. My family didn't go to church. I always say I was a heathen from Heath. Okay? And anyway, and so, we didn't go, you didn't hear about the Lord, and in my household that I was raised in, my mama was pretty much the boss. And, we grew up in the 50s and the 60s. We got married in the early 70s. We'll be married 43 years this summer. So, but, we grew up in the hippie movement and things. But I grew up in a home that, like I said, my mama was pretty much ruled the roost. My dad was real submissive to her. But my dad was also an alcoholic. And so as I got older and things, and my dad would get worse about his drinking and things. And we didn't hear anything about the Lord or goodness. My dad had a really good job. He was an electrician. But when you're an alcoholic, that doesn't mean you can always work. I didn't have a good father figure. So it was kind of hard with me when I became a Christian to see God as a father. My dad would drink, and then he couldn't work. And when you're an electrician, when you work construction, you have to go out of town for a week, and sometimes even more than 1 week, and you'd come back home and things. My daddy'd get out there, and he'd get drunk. And so, so he couldn't work. And he couldn't work, and then my grandfather would have to go get him. And, he was usually in jail by then. And so, and they could bring him home. Well, we wouldn't have any money. When Paul talks about abounding and being abased, I know all about that. There were times when Daddy did work, we abound, but then there were times he didn't work and we abased. I know what it's like to have to move every 6 months because you don't have money to pay your rent. I know what it's like to maybe have your water turned off. You have to choose. Are you going to have food for your kids, or are you going to have water, or are you going to have lights? I know what that's like. I know I work in a school system, a very poor, I'm retired now, but I worked in a school system with very, very poor kids, and I understand the dilemmas with their parents and things that, they didn't have food sometimes, or maybe they didn't. I can remember not having food, and, and there wasn't anything out there to help you at that time. And so, sometimes, I would go to school sometimes, and, lunch was only 50 cents, but I didn't have 50 cents. And so, so there was, my idea of a father was one who couldn't take care of you and didn't have your best. Anyway, and so, and it was just, so you did the best you can. I did the best I could in a bad situation. I have a brother and a sister who had to do the same thing, and anyway, but I always felt like my dad loved me, but he didn't do what was best for me. And a dad should do that. Do what is best for you and your mom. And like I said, my mama, them yell and scream and holler, and when I was growing up, I always said, I don't want to be like my mama. Didn't want to yell and scream. Didn't like to hear a lot of fighting and arguing and things, So anyway, Ronnie and I met when I was 15. And, so we started dating and things, and it just, well, we dated, and I would go to church with him on Sunday nights because his parents made him go. And I didn't really know if there was, was the Lord. I didn't know what Jesus was. I'd hear the name Jesus. We had a Bible in our house. It was a Masonic Bible. It sat on our kitchen table or our living room table, I don't think it was ever open. It was pretty. It had pretty pictures. That's pretty much all I knew. I didn't know. In the 4th grade, I remember I had a Christian teacher, and every Monday she would ask you to quote your scripture verse you learned in Sunday school class. I didn't go to Sunday school, and that was embarrassing to me, y'all, because everybody was quoting these, and I would learn scripture verses. I'd learn one of them as somebody was saying it, where I could let people think I went to church. I don't know why it was embarrassing. I didn't know, because I really didn't know the Lord, but it sounded like you needed to have this. So I guess probably from, for every Monday in the 4th grade, I probably quoted John 3:16 every week. That's when I learned, y'all, and things, and as rough as that was, those were hard times, but I had happy times in that too, but there were really, really, hard times when I know what it's like to catch rain in a rain barrel to take a bath. Not most people don't know what that is. I know how to. I can drain a water tank, a hot water tank, to get the water out, to be able to wash your hair, or to take a bath, or to do your dishes. I learned those things because we didn't always have water, lights, and food and things. But I started dating Ronnie, and like I said, I'd go to church with him on Sunday nights, and because he was made to, and we'd sit on the back row. Donnie would sit with us back there because he had to go too. And things, and I would hear, we didn't pay attention to what was being said, or at least I didn't. I was there with my boyfriend. I wanted to hold his hand. I didn't want to hear what the preacher was saying, and so we did that for a while, and then Ronnie, when I was after he graduated from high school, he won the draft. He got to go in the Army. So the lottery, they had a lottery back there, and so we pretty much, he had to go to the Army, and we stayed together during that time. We got engaged during that time. He was in the Army, and he went to Germany, and I got, I finished school, and he came home about the time I finished school. And, that was during the Vietnam War, and, I was really into, hey, yeah, I like this, make love, not war, I was really into things like, women's lib. My mama was, the head of the house anyway. One of my songs was Helen Reddy's, I'm woman, hear me roar. If I have to, I can do anything. I'm strong. I'm invincible. I'm woman. Woohoo! And I really thought I was it. I can do this. I don't have to have anybody else to help me. I can do it because, Helen Reddy said I could. And so here we go, and I liked, I think, okay, make love, not war, and, you can buy yourself a Coke, and, we can go have unity together. Did y'all know we could buy a Coke and have unity? I always thought that was the craziest thing, but that sounded good, And so, but anyway, I'm going to give it to Ronnie now where he can go, and then we'll go from there.
I understand I should have bailed out a long time ago. But I didn't have enough sense to. Fell in love instead. But actually, one of the things we was going to give our testimonies like this, we came from very different backgrounds. And when you get married, you bring a lot of baggage into your marriage, understand? A lot of views, different views. And, when you first get married, well, whose job is it to take out the garbage, My mama did, I understand. But what I'm saying, that you bring a lot of stuff in the marriage that you have to work out, that you were brought up in different circumstances. Actually, I was brought up in a very peaceful home. I don't remember Mom and Dad ever fighting. Maybe they did, but I don't remember it. I don't remember Daddy ever drinking. And we were drugged to church every time the doors were open. We raised the Church of Christ. Every time the doors were open, we were there, and we rebelled against that when we got older and thought it wasn't fair. We had to go to church and all the other kids. didn't, but I'm kind of thankful now, more than kind of thankful for my parents. And they were good parents. I thought my dad was a little strict, I think, in certain areas, but I never doubted that he loved me, and they were very hard. They were very hard working. They really showed us a work ethic and showed us that we should work to make a living. So anyway, that's basically my upbringing, and I had a real difficult time in school. And I actually, somewhere I came along the line, that some of this is hard to understand. But I come into the understanding that actually I wasn't very smart, I've come to the conclusion that school, you can be smart, school may not be your thing. Donnie and I both work the same. We're considered do a very good job at what we do for a living. But anyway, I came under that somewhere. I got a hold of that because I made a lot of bad grades in school. If I made a D, I thought, man, I did. But anyway, I did graduate. I finally stuck in there, and I can remember poor mom, drilling us, trying to get us to learn spelling words, and she would drill us, and we did make it out. I made it out of high school. During my high school year, I met Rossie. I was a senior when I met Rossie, and actually, I guess they should have put me in jail because I was 19 and she was 15 when we met and started dating. And the way we met is we had I don't know if I'd call her a friend, but we had a young girl that lived in the neighborhood that we did. It was Rossie's friend, and I had seen Rossie we met at the bowling alley. By the way, she was and we met at the bowling. I'd seen her, but I hadn't paid much attention to her. She was with another boy that I knew that ran track with us together. But anyway, this particular, it was on a Saturday night. I know it was on a Saturday night, but on a Saturday night we went in there, and this friend was named Pam, and she wanted to know if her and Rossie could go riding with us. And back then, that was in the 60s, 69, 60. What you did is you cruised, you'd go through the Dairy Queen, go through the 19th hole, and downtown, the bowling alley, and you just continued to do that. So we said, yeah, they could. And actually, at that time, my senior year in high school, I worked 8 hours a day, and then I worked part on Saturday, so I worked a full time. And Donnie and I had bought a car, but Donnie and I shared the car. But when I had to work on Friday night, so I'd let Donnie drive it. And so we both had our license, but it was actually my car. And so I should have known better, but I didn't. So anyway, didn't do better anyway. So anyway, they said, yeah, y'all can go with us. So I gave Donnie the keys, and I got in the back seat with Rossie and Pam and gave Donnie the keys. And Rossie doesn't remember this, so it must have not been that impressive to her, but I kissed her before we got off the parking lot. And you think, and that that sounds like, man, he must have been a womanizer, And it sounds like she must have been a real, not too nice of a girl. But actually, that wasn't true. We weren't angels, you understand? We weren't angels. But actually, I had a girlfriend, and a steady girlfriend. I had kind of opened myself up and cared more for her, and she did for me. And that lasted about a year, and it had been about a year since I had a girlfriend. So I really wasn't looking for something other than a girlfriend, and I guess a wife eventually. Understand I wasn't. My motives weren't, but that's what happened. And when I kissed her, I didn't realize that'd be the last female I'd kissed for all of these, and hopefully till I die, except my granddaughters, kissing them on the head, kissing on the forehead, But anyway, I did that, and she must have liked it somewhat because she stayed with me. But anyway, they went riding with us, and Donnie and I, we used to, Noble Park, where there's that big statue of that Indian Indian Head. There, we used to play football there, and Pam and Rossie and then Pam's boyfriend used to come by there, and they'd come by on Sunday afternoons and want me to go riding with them. So I went riding, and Pam's was trying to get us together because, Rossie was getting in her way, She was but anyway, she said, Rossie will go out. She told me there at school, Rossie will go out with you if you ask her, call her and ask her. And she told Rossie, he's want to ask you out. And well, Rossie was, like I didn't realize at the time, but they didn't have a phone because now you heard her testimony, you know why. They didn't have a phone, so she told me that if I wanted to ask her out, I'd have to call her on Christmas Eve, that she'd be at her grandparents' house. And she gave me the number to call her at her grandparents' house, and that was Christmas Eve in 1969, I guess, 1969. So I called, and her aunt answered the phone and gave me a hard time. I missed the chance, forget that. But I did, and I called her, and I asked her out. And her mom happened to know my mom, and she said, she'd let her go out with me. But first couple of times we'd have to double date, which we did. And so anyway, we began to date. And that was, like I say, we started dating right after the first of the year, I guess. So we started dating, and we dated up till I graduated from, I guess, May. I graduated from high school, and like I say, they had the draft, and Donnie and I both were 90, of course, being twin brothers. By the way, Donnie's 5 minutes older than I am. 5 minutes older than I am. I'm the baby of the family. Save the best to last, and I was a surprise also, because of course when we were 1950s when I was born, and ultrasound was a long ways down the road, and they didn't hear but one heartbeat, so I was kind of a surprise when I poked it. But anyway, we began to date, and we fell in love. Began to date, and we fell in love. Actually, I worked 40 hours a day, and then I would walk her to class. During my senior year, I went to trade school for 3 hours, and I went to Bible class and slept in Bible class, by the way. But I went to Bible class, and then I'd go home at 1:30, and I'd take a little nap and go to work. It had to be work at 3, and then I'd work till midnight, then get up the next morning and go to school. It was really kind of rough, but I wanted a car pretty bad. So anyway, so we would only go out on Saturday nights. I'd pick her up about 7:30, and she had a curfew, had to be home at midnight. So we'd go out on Saturday nights till midnight, and then Sunday afternoons we would usually get together and drive around. But anyway, we fell in love, and she decided that she was going to wait for me till when I went into the military, that she was going to wait for me. But when I went in the military, while we were dating, I don't believe we ever had an argument. I don't recall it ever having an argument or disagreement. But some things are going to change. I went in the military, and any of this is hard to speak of, but I'm responsible for the choices I made. Understand? You won't, as long as you try to put someone else responsible. If I put her in, say she's responsible for my problems, and my problems will not be. I had to take responsibility for them to be healed. But anyway, I went in the military, and Donnie and I were drafted at the same time. We went into basic training and AIT together. And then Donnie went to Alaska. Donnie went to Fairbanks, Alaska. And I had orders to go to Vietnam. That was during the Vietnam War, like Rossie said. So I came home from leave with orders to go to Vietnam. And so, I left home expecting to go to Vietnam, and that was in 1970. And at that time, they were starting to pull troops out of Vietnam. They was trying to pull out of Vietnam. So they changed my orders, and about 300 and some odd, 400 more, and sent us to Germany. So I ended up going to Germany. I ended up in a place called Kaiserslautern, Germany. And so I ended up in Germany, and I had never been alone by myself, because if Donnie was always with me. You ask what it's like to be a twin. Well, we did everything together. We even went through basic training and AIT together. But they couldn't send two brothers in a war zone, so they sent him to Alaska, and I was supposed to go to Vietnam, but I ended up in Germany. But anyway, to make a long story short, while I was in Germany in the military, I got involved in drugs. Seemed like everybody was either, we called them juicers or heads. You know, you use drugs in, and I got involved in drugs. In Germany, they don't use marijuana. They use what's called hashes. Hashes is a byproduct of marijuana. Actually, it's more potent, where they take it and they cook it down and boil it. Anyway, so I got to smoking hashes and I used some LSD. I got to use some acid LSD. And I did that I was over about 11 months. I did that basically for 11 months. And I didn't realize it at the time. And, of course, I listened to headbanger music. If you know what headbanger music is, you get high. So anyway, got to listen. And I didn't realize it at the time till after I came home. But I came back from Germany a different man than I had left. I came back from Germany I was an angry young man when I came back from Germany. The Vietnam War wasn't popular, and our generation, they looked down upon you if you were in the Army. I'm thankful that's not the true now. And it took me years to get over some of this. But I came back from, like I say, from the military as an angry young man, and our relationship changed greatly after I came back. And it was me. I changed. I changed, and I didn't realize it, but I did. And like I say, I was extremely angry. I remember at work one time, and I'd gone to work at the railroad then, and somebody asked about, did I think we ought to strike over something? I said, yeah, I think we ought to strike every chance we get. And I actually meant that. And I felt some way I had been done wrong. I take responsibility for that, because that was my attitude, and I changed. And I'm thankful that the Lord changed me. But anyway, when we didn't get along very well after that, actually we fought quite often or disagreed quite often. We've never actually slugged it out, Not yet, anyway. But anyway, and probably Rossie shouldn't have married me, but she did. And so I'll let her tell a little bit now.
Okay. And I'll try. I was ready to get out of my home, the house that I was raised in by that time. Things were getting worse and worse and worse. So even though I knew what Ronnie was doing and everything, I was ready to get out. So I was ready to get married. It really didn't matter that we weren't getting along. I just wanted out. And while Ronnie and Donnie and David and Debbie and some of them were doing drugs, I never did the drugs, y'all, because, let me finish my thought. Hadn't had the slug fest yet, but okay. The thing is that, my dad was an alcoholic, and I didn't want anything to control me. If anybody was going to control me, it was going to be me. And I wanted to control everything, and that's kind of sad. I wanted to control Ronnie, too, when we got married. But, I was not going to let it control me. So, before there was a designated driver, I was the designated driver, because while they would do the other, we're doing the drugs and things, I wouldn't do that. But I liked all the other concepts of being a hippie. I kind of like, make love, not war, let there be peace on earth, all the things that you buy into that I didn't know you couldn't have all this unless you have made Jesus Christ your Lord at that time. Okay, so
I was just going to say one thing that, my attitude towards her was I thought she was holding me back because I wanted her to get high too, I wanted my wife to get high too. And I didn't like that. But the truth is she was holding me back. And now I'm thankful that she was holding me back, understand? But at that time I didn't care much for that. I wasn't thinking about dumping her, but I just didn't think much of that. So anyway, we got married on
Okay. On July the 7th, 1972, we got married. Yay. And we got married, and we had this cute little apartment, upstairs on Jefferson Street and everything, everything furnished, Nobody can do that for $90 anymore. That's all we had to pay is $90 a month, and everything was paid. And so, well, we started our routine. I'm a big sports person. I like to bow. I always played softball. I was into volleyball. I loved everything sports. And Ronnie came home, and all he wanted to do is get high. So we pretty much got married and went our own way. He would stay high. He would stay at our apartment, and he would get high, and I would go bow. So I bowed 3 or 4 nights a week. I was gone, and he was at home. I'd come home, and he'd be sitting in front of the stereo with his headphones. Because when you live in an apartment, yeah, that's what he was doing. Anyway, we lived upstairs from an elderly lady who couldn't have heard the music, but the people who lived across the hallway could hear the music, so Ronnie had to have his headphones on. And I'd come in, and he would, he'd smoked a joint. Yeah, he'd smoked a joint, and he'd have some Boone's Farm wine, So there you go. I'd come in, and so, okay, And so we didn't talk. We didn't communicate. We pretty much just lived together, in the house and things because we couldn't, because that wasn't what I was going to do and things. But we got married, and, here we go. So, okay.
We didn't talk much, we didn't communicate. Every day wasn't terrible, but we did and we never actually, like I say, never came to blows, but we argued quite a bit, and we just didn't have anything in common. And like I say, I changed. I was the one who had changed, and eventually I did begin to bowl a little bit, and we bowled together a little bit, but so I guess you can go ahead now.
All right, I'm going to tell you a fishing pole story. Okay, we'd only been married a little while, and I worked and he worked, so I made my money and he had made his money, and Ronnie likes to fish and everything, and so he had one. We went and bought me a fishing rod. And I grew up fishing with my grandparents, so I like to fish. It's okay, And so we went fishing. We went down to Ballard County, and we were fishing and everything, and having a pretty good time. And I caught a fish, and I can take my own fish off. That doesn't bother me. But this one swallowed the hook. How dare it? Anyway, and so I couldn't get it out. Everything I would do, I tried to get down there and get it anyway, and ask him if he had, like needle nose pliers to get the fish out with, where you can get down it. I know this is gory. Get down in his mouth for all you fishermen, and get it out. Well, he didn't have any. And anyway, and I'd pull, I really hated to pull its guts out and things, but, you might have to. And couldn't get that hook out. Didn't have anything to cut the line with. So I asked Ronnie, I said, Ronnie, would you take this fish off the hook for me? No. What? No. I said, well, I can't get it off. Can you take this? No. I'm going like, no.
Don't go fishing, you got to
why? Anyway, and so, I asked him several times, and he said no, and he never would take that fish off. Anyway, he said, well, if I take that fish off that hook, I'm going to use your fishing rod. I said, no, you're not. He said, yeah. He said, if I have to take that fish off, you can just quit fishing, and I'm going to use the fishing rod. I said, no, you're not. He said, yes. He said, you're not going to fish with it after you get through, if I get this fish off. I said, well, I said, no, you're not. And I took that. Here you go. I took the fishing rod and went, whoa. Nobody got to fish with that fishing rod.
Should have killed her and buried her out in the backyard. But, that was funny. It is looking, it wasn't funny then. I was mad. Needless to say, she was too. But, if you go fishing, you ought to take your own fish off the pole. But anyway, when you think about that, and it's kind of funny, but, when we'd have been dating, I'd have took that fish off. So there is a lesson, I'm making a point to that. If we'd have been dating, I would have taken that fish off. And I hate to say it, but if that happened today, I'd probably take that fish off. That put me to the test. But but I wasn't about to then. So I guess we left and went home right after that. I don't remember, but I should have killed her. But being the merciful person that I was, I did.
Yeah, he would only kill me for breaking a fishing pole. Okay. We hadn't been that happened. We hadn't been married long. I mean, it was probably the first summer we were married. And we hadn't been married very long. And one day I came home from work, and Ronnie got off before I did, and he wasn't there. I thought, oh, well, that's unusual. So I waited. So I called his mom, the lady that lived downstairs, let us use her phone. So I went downstairs and called. And his mom answered the phone. I said, is Ronnie over there? And she paused for a moment. And she said, well, Ronnie and Cletus have gone to buy a car. I said, a car? He said, yeah, Ronnie's going to buy a car. I said, he's going to buy a car? I said, he's gone to buy a van. Anyway, if you're a hippie, you got to have a Volkswagen van. He went to buy a Volkswagen van without consulting me. Nuh-uh. And so, I wasn't real happy with that because where I came from, my mama ruled the roost, y'all, and I thought, no, I was mad by the time he got home. I was not a happy camper, to say the least. And by the way, y'all heard me say earlier I didn't want to be like my mama. My mama would have broke that fishing pole too, y'all. Anyway, and after I broke, years later, after I thought about, oh gosh, my mama, how did that happen? But and so I'm going like, oh. So anyway, we got a Volkswagen van. What? Okay. Anyway, so anybody, anytime, that's one of the things we want you to know. If a married couple, if you're going to buy something big, you need to do it together and discuss it. Just don't go out and buy something because you want it, because that may not be something that that you're going to agree on and everything. And we're pretty much, I might, I can go out and buy, a blouse, a dress, a pair of shoes. But if I go out and buy, a Volkswagen van, I better let him know. Did you want it?
Well, I was just going to say about finances that as far as our finances, neither one of us, back then it looked like it, but neither one of us just go out and buy something all the time. In fact, I get money for Christmas. It'll take me 3 or 4 months to decide what I want because I'm really pretty well satisfied. But so, as far as our finances, she actually keeps the checkbook, and I can't tell you how many millions of dollars we're worth, but I probably could. But I have a debit card and I have a little cash. But one time I remember back in the 90s, someone, and it was a lady, and her husband, she just absolutely was mad because her husband wouldn't do the checkbook. And my advice to her would be, my advice to him would do the checkbook. But it's whatever you're comfortable with. That's at least my view, and we're very comfortable. We don't go out and buy big stuff, either one of them. And I always tell her that she doesn't think I'm worth full price for anything because she always goes to sale, But anyway, that's the way we do our finances. But it's according to, if she was a compulsive buyer, then we couldn't survive like that. Or if I was, then we couldn't survive with me in charge of the finances. But as far as, we get along the way we do it.
Yeah. Okay, we've been married for almost a year, and I found out I was pregnant. Anyway, so we were excited about that, didn't know a whole lot about it, but so we moved from our apartment, we got us a house, we make room for a baby, We were all excited about having a baby, and so during that time, I was due in December, right before Christmas, and about 6 weeks before I was due, my dad passed away, and it was a pretty hard time, and I was having a little bit of problems with holding fluid and things like that, probably would be called maybe preeclampsia, and they didn't call it that then. And so, anyway, we were excited. And so on December the 12th, I felt like, I think I'm maybe in labor. So we went to the doctor, and sure enough, I was in labor in any way. And he said, Rossie, I can't promise you everything's going to be okay with your baby. And this is where I'm going to cry. And anyway, so we went he sent us on to the hospital and everything, and then Dr. Price came on over, and he sat there. Anyway, he came in and told us, he said, Rossie, your baby's dead. It was due date. That was actually the date I was due on and everything. She was full term. It was a little girl. And, we were, I was devastated because, here I mean, Ronnie and I's relationship wasn't that good. But I was going to have something to love me unconditionally. Children love their parents unconditionally. She was dead. And Dr. Price is a wonderful Christian man. I wasn't a Christian. We weren't serving the Lord. And he came in, and he actually counseled us right there before I had her. And, not to blame each other for this. It was something, you didn't know it was going to happen and things. But it was just, it was such a downtime. And after that, I pretty much didn't care a whole lot about a lot of things then, I went back to work and, whatever, And he did tell us, I asked him how long I should wait to have a baby. And anyway, he said, well, physically you should wait, a certain amount of months and things. He said, mentally you probably need to get as pregnant as quick as you can. And, and I sat there, I said, okay. And, at that point, it didn't matter that Ronnie and I weren't getting along very well. I wanted a baby. And it was just a few months after that I got pregnant again. But during that time, Ronnie's going to tell you his part in a minute, we didn't talk about it. We were silent about it, and people don't know what to say, there were people who come in and say they were sorry. Ronnie's aunt came in who knew what I was going through, been there. She'd done that. She'd lost a couple of kids, and things, and cried with me. And, when you go through things, sometimes we wonder about these things we go through. God uses them some way for good. And that we learn. I didn't know that at that time, but later on, But Ronnie's going to tell you his aspect of this because I was hurt because he didn't seem to be hurt about what we went through.
Somewhere I had got the view that we never discussed it. We never grieved together. Not once. It was years later before she ever realized that I even cried. But I did, and I cried. Went to my parents' house and broke down and cried. But my view was that I needed to be strong for her. Somewhere I came across that. That's not what she needed. She needed somebody to cry with her like my aunt had, someone to grieve with her, and someone to discuss the situation. And I wasn't wanting to be mean. I wasn't wanting to be mean to her. I wasn't wanting to be uncaring. That was just the view that I had, that I needed to be strong, and to be strong meant I didn't cry. I remember going home. We'd had her, she'd carried the baby for 9 months, and we'd fixed up the nursery and had the nursery in there. And she was in the hospital, by the way. They put her in a room off by herself where she didn't have to be with other people that had children. And I remember it was Christmas, Christmas time, and I remember going home by myself in the living room and just grieving and just thinking about it. But I had to be strong for her, so she never, not once did she ever see me cry. It was years ago, years later, before she would be told that I had actually cried. Needless to say, that was a mistake. And we didn't see the baby. They'd offered to, and we didn't, because we had gone through her dad's death. That I would do things different if that was, we would.
Yeah. I was at a point at that time, such a low, I couldn't handle it, and we actually, had the baby donated to science to see why, and hopefully to help other people.
She felt the baby when it died. She felt because the spirit leave the body. I felt it moving, Of course I couldn't, but she felt it. But anyway, I remember Dr. Price coming down. I was at that time. They had the dad's den where you waited, and where you couldn't go with your wife, and I remember him coming down there and getting me, and I remember telling him, well, thank you for what you've done for me. I remember he cried. I remember he cried for us. He advised us to, like I say, to get pregnant again and have another child, and we did that.
Yeah. We did that. We have a boy named Pruitt, who was the next one about 13 months later, and of course, we were just ecstatic, and then 2 years later we have another boy. His name's Barry, and so we were blessed with two. But I have an ornament for our daughter that I put up every year that was made for her. My sister-in-law had made one for me and things. And it's a time, you can't, I'm sure others who have lost baby and children, when that day comes around, birthdays, you can't help but think about it, how hard it is. And, we're talking 41 years later, and still, that can be a grief. But actually, God has turned a lot of that into joy on some things. I want y'all to realize that. I blame God for that. And it took me a long time, because the only concept I had about God was, by what I knew is that he could do anything. Then why did he let my baby die? He could have kept my baby from dying. And, and I didn't understand. But, I still don't understand that. But, I have learned a few things that I know that God has used me to help others who've been in the same situation. I also know that we know all things work together for good to those who are called by the Lord and according to his purpose. I know that, and I believe that. That's here. If that wasn't here, I wouldn't be here if that wasn't true. And like I said, God's used it for good, and I have a blessed hope. One day I'm going to heaven, and I'm going to see my daughter. And, I'm going to go and worship around the throne with her. We're going to worship my Jesus together.
By the way, if 40 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be in a church like this and sitting up here speaking, there's no way. But you never know. You never know what. Don't say you won't do anything or won't be. But our lives are going to change for the better. Things are going to turn around. And Pruitt was born. Our oldest son was born. And I was hesitant to have another one because when I saw him, I didn't see how I could love another one as much as I loved him. And all this time before, people that are involved in drugs are focusing. It's all about them. That was what it was about me. I'm going to get high. I'm going to feel good. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I don't care what you like. You're welcome to come along, but I don't care what you like. That's what I'm going to do. That's called selfishness. And that destroys marriages, destroys homes, destroys relationships. But anyway, things are going to change because Pruitt was born. And like I say, I fell in love with him at first sight. He was a very difficult young baby, by the way. We didn't get much sleep the first 6 months that he was born. But life is going to change and life's going to be better. And I don't remember saying this or saying to myself or even thinking it, but I quit using drugs when Pruitt was born. That's 40. He's just celebrated his 40th birthday, so that was 40 years ago. I can't remember whether I actually quit. We were trying to remember and we couldn't. Whether I quit using alcohol at all. If not, it was just very, very little that I used. But life was changing. And we began to focus on a little bitty baby about that long. And I did, and I quit focusing on myself and quit being so selfish. Now, we're actually not going to meet the Lord for several years yet as a reality in life. But we began to go to church regularly, began to take him there to the Church of Christ where I was raised. And we began to go to church regularly, got involved in church, quite involved in church. Rossie got involved in the nursery and was head over the nursery. we begin to go. We begin to go there and to do that. And life was getting better. It wasn't perfect, you know. Still not perfect. She's still not the perfect one. but life was beginning to get better, and we were getting to have something together that we could focus on that was ours, and a relationship began to build better, and get involved in that. And that went on for several years, and we were involved in church regularly. Every time the door, just like my parents, every time the doors was open, we were there and had our kids there. And I guess we went there for several. Pruitt was born in I'm trying to get some days. Pruitt was born in 75, and we went to church regularly there. And in 1979, we were there on a Sunday night, at church on a Sunday night, and my oldest brother, David, came in, which he had rebelled against church, and you couldn't even talk to him. He didn't want to hear anything about that. You know, he didn't want to hear it. And I had rebelled too, but I had come back. But anyway, one Sunday night, him and Debbie walked in there, and he wanted to be water baptized. Hadn't been there in years, and he wanted to be water baptized. And so, of course, we were thrilled about that. We thought that's wonderful, you know. And so that's what happened. And then on Memorial Day of 1979, they began to. We were almost every holiday, our family would all get together and we'd have a picnic, and we went out in Oval Park. That's when they had the rides, and Rossie was with our boys, you know, fooling with the rides, and we were talking, and David and them, then we went back to my mom's and had ice cream, I think, or something. Anyway, they began to share with us about maybe God did more than what we thought he could do. Maybe he was still, you know, I didn't think God. I thought he kind of wound up the clock and let it run. You know, I'd never been taught about a personal relationship with a living God, you know. And so they began to talk about that. And my reaction to that was that I didn't like it. That made me mad. I could argue Christian Church of Christ doctrine and never read the Bible, but I could argue their doctrine. And that made me mad. And I remember saying to my parents and him, they've been talking to some Pentecostals. And I didn't really know what Pentecostals believed that very much. But anyway, that made me mad, like I say. And then we went home that night, and I was mad. I went to bed mad. But I remember saying it. I didn't say this out loud. I just said it in my mind. I said, Lord, come in and teach me the truth. Well, what I wanted the Lord to do was come in and show me the truth where I could straighten them out. But I didn't sleep well that night, needless to say. I was mad. But I woke up the next morning, and I didn't know what had happened, but the sky was blue, the grass was green. When I would do drugs, what they call trip your mind, just run, you can't. And I was tripping on those little Bible lessons that I had heard when I was a little baby that I didn't care anything about hearing, you know, but it was crammed down my throat, you know. I felt like they were. And I didn't know what had happened. I know now. I was born again. But I didn't know what was happening. But the Lord was answering my prayer, and all those verses was going on. And I got up in the morning, and I'd get up in the morning, I'd read the Bible. At break, I'd read the Bible. Come home. At lunch, I'd read the Bible. Come home, read the Bible till time to go to bed. And do the same thing over and over and over again. And that was my salvation testimony, and I'll let Rossie share a little bit.
While David and Debbie were sharing about what had happened in their life, I was with their kids and my mother-in-law and my kids, because my kids were little, and we were riding rides. I wasn't hearing what was going on. And, you know, so when I come back and Ronnie's fussing, you know, about what was going on, and we stopped at his parents' house afterwards, and his dad was not happy, you know, and really not happy anyway, and talked about, you know, some Pentecost, you know, who they've been talking to. Well, the next morning, when Ronnie woke up, he was a different person, y'all. I mean, he was really, just overnight, you know. And, of course, like I said, I finally, that night I asked Ronnie, I said, well, what did David and Debbie share that's making you think all of this? He said, well, if they wanted you to know, they would have told you. The old man was still there at that time, okay? I'm like, what? Anyway. And so it took a while for me to figure out the whole story. I mean, it wasn't like they even came and told me, because I guess they thought I was there, and I had to figure it out a little bit on my own, what would happen. Finally, I got to hear it, but it was a few weeks. But, I thought, wow, I mean, because Ronnie never read the Bible, and he got up that way, and he did, and he'd come home, and he'd read the Bible, and he would get up and read the Bible. He'd go to work, come back and read the Bible. He was doing that so much that, man, the kids weren't seeing him. I thought, what? I mean, hey, and I finally said, I'm glad you've had this experience. See, I hadn't had an experience yet. I hadn't had any, anyway, but, you got two boys and a wife here you're going to have to pay some attention to, anyway. So he had to learn a balance there, and things, but... So, and he was acting, he was nicer and things, and the way he treated me and the things he said, and I thought, and he would talk about what he was learning, and I thought, okay, I don't know what's going on here, but, I said, I guess I'm going to have to get on the bandwagon because I need to see if this is truth. So I thought, okay, Lord, if there's more than what I know, because all I knew was you worked your salvation. So that's the reason I did a nursery. Ronnie and I, they asked us to make hospital rounds to go and visit, and so Ronnie and I would go visit people in the hospital. And, we'd go see how they were and talk to them and leave. One time we went to the hospital, and a preacher from another Church of Christ was in there, and we saw, I think, Donnie, was that you? Because one time I went with you. It was Donnie, because, hey, they don't know different people. so Ronnie was working, and Donnie went with me. And so, and he asked Donnie to pray for him. I went, what? We didn't know you prayed for people who were sick. We never had, Ronnie and I never had, anyway. Put Donnie in a little unusual circumstance, and we didn't know anything about praying. We didn't know you prayed for the sick, I thought, really? So anyway, we just went to tell you we hope you feel better. The doctors do their job and leave. That's pretty much what we had done. But anyway, so I thought, okay, Lord, there is a God. I believe there is a God. And I want to know the truth. So I'm going to start reading, and I'm going to start reading the New Testament because that's where Jesus shows up. So I decided I would read the New Testament. And so, daily I was reading the New Testament, and of course I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, so I was still busy during the day, but, times when there were naps and, things, I was trying to read the Word and things. And on July the 1st, 1979, Ronnie and Donnie's birthday, we were having a birthday party for them. I was miserable. Anyway, and I wasn't enjoying this birthday party. And anyway, because I didn't really realize God could talk to you, talk to your spirit. And all I could hear during that birthday party, you've read about me and you've learned about me. Are you going to accept this? Are you going to accept this? And, the only thing I knew how to accept at that time was you had to be water baptized because that's what we were taught. I didn't know I could have asked him into my heart, that way. And I said, yeah, I accept this. So I wanted to get to church. I needed a baptistry. I needed somebody to baptize me where I would be right with the Lord. And I couldn't tell you what the preacher preached about that night or anything like that. I was just waiting and whoom, up there, I was baptized. But what was amazing to me? I do know that people can come to church and act like a Christian and look like they are really serving the Lord because people would come up and ask me why I got baptized. I was already a Christian. I was already doing a work in the church. Why was I baptized? To tell them there's more, that there's a relationship. That we didn't have a relationship. Yes, we were doing work. We were working, but we didn't have a relationship with the Lord. And so, people can put on a show, and that's kind of scary to me because knowing there are people out there really thinking that they are saved, and they may not be because they're doing works instead of really actually having a relationship with the Lord.
We're going to need to hurry up a little bit on this, and try to anyway. But if you wonder how we ended up here from Church of Christ, actually, Brother and Sister Parrish, y'all counseled David and Debbie and did some personal ministry to them. And Bobby Strong, a friend of ours that used to be on, one time he was, not at that time at first anyway, but he was on the staff up here. He worked at the railroad with us, and David told him about that he'd been born again, but he had a problem that him and his wife, David and his Debbie, what had happened is Debbie had felt like she had fallen in love with another man, and they hadn't had a physical, her and the other man hadn't had a physical relationship, but that's what they had shared with us anyway. And so Bobby, we began, when all of my brothers and I, and Donnie and Susie weren't married at the time, we began to have a Bible study together, and Bobby kind of invited himself to our Bible study. And so he began to come to our Bible study, and he began to invite us up here. But before we ever came up here, first time I ever heard Brother Parrish speak was you was on the riverfront during the Full Gospel Fellowship as on a Full Gospel Businessmen. And you spoke on the family. In fact, you spoke from Ephesians on the family. And so the next night, Rossie was working. The next night we both went, and we went up there, and I'm going to play it real quick. But we went up there, and you were spoke again, Brother Parrish, but someone else was scheduled.
They was flying over St. Louis. They couldn't get here.
And so you spoke again, and you gave your testimony on how you got this way, how you received the Holy Spirit. But anyway, we were there, and I'd never been to a church except the Church of Christ at that time, and we were, or a Christian, even a meeting, and we were there, and they were praying with people. We'd never seen anyone slain in the Spirit, and there were people laying all over the floor, and kind of weird, but we were hungry, so we kept going. Anyway, we started visiting up here on Sunday nights at the Church of Christ where we went. They'd start at 6:30, and at 6, and at 6:45 on the dot, they were through. You know, you didn't go a minute over. So we'd jump in the car. At that time, you were having service up here at 7:30. So we'd jump in the car and drive up here for y'all's Sunday evening service. So we did that for a while, and eventually it got to the thing where it just grieved me to go there because I felt there was more than what was. So we ended up coming up here, and that's how we got here. And things went really pretty well, and we began to attend church regularly here, and we began to grow a little bit. And things went real well, and I was working at the railroad shops, and Rossie was working. We were doing all right, and the railroad shops laid us off. All of us were laid off, and we began to. And we lost over probably about 3/4 of our income. Right at 3/4 of our income when I was laid off. And during that time, I drew railroad retirement, and at that time, the railroad retirement, you could unemployment. I meant to say unemployment, but you could make $10 a day and still draw your days. So Donnie and I and David, we worked a lot of days. We worked all day long for $10 where we could, and we started going. We didn't just sit around the house. We were doing everything we could to meet our bills. We started going to the U-Pick farm, and we ate so many purple hull peas. David and Debbie's daughter won't eat them to this day because we ate them. Rossie began to learn how to can. She actually took in ironing, and we did whatever it was. But we never missed a bill. We never missed a bill, and the Lord provided for us. Lunell, you won't remember it, but one day you gave us $5 one Sunday night or Wednesday night. We didn't have any milk. No. We did after we got the $5. One time during this time, I hope we're not going to keeping you too late. But one time during that time, this was after I was without work for 6 months, and right as my unemployment was about to run out, I got a job working at the school board as a janitor at the school board, and so we were glad to get work. We were still way under what we were used. Probably it wasn't much more than unemployment as far as what I made, but it was work, and we were doing we were working honest. It was honest. And when I hired in there, I felt the Lord told me, I want you to learn to be a servant. You know, that's the lowest man on the totem pole when you know. And I did that. I actually did it with great joy, the presence of the Lord. I was aware of the Lord and I worked afternoons, Rossie worked days, so we didn't see one another as much as we'd like to. I'd come home for supper, and then we'd have the weekends together. And so I'd been to do that, and to help meet needs, like I say, we went to UPEC Farm, and Donnie and David and I began to mow yards. So I hate to mow yards now because I got so burnt out on. But we began to take yard work working, and then take yard work to keep her heads above the water, and we did that for several years. And during that time, the boys were older then, and we were playing basketball up at the basketball goal, and I was playing with them, and glasses fell off, and I stepped on my glasses and broke my glasses. And we had an old car old Plymouth car that we were driving up here, and the radiator started leaking. So I went to the junkyard and got another radiator and put it in there. Well, the radiator that they said would work, it wasn't large enough, didn't have a large enough capacity to, and so my car, after you drove it so long, would get hot. And I was also, and the boys were coming up to school. They weren't coming up to school. Well, actually, the boys, we had just one pair of pants, Levi's, a piece that were suitable for them to wear to school. So Rossie would wash their pants every evening. And so we were sitting there, and Rossie was working. At that time, she was working at afternoons, and I was there at the sink, and I didn't do this real often, but I was washing dishes at the sink, and a scripture came to me, and the scripture is an Old Testament scripture, says, I'll make you the head and not the tail. You'll loan and not borrow. And that scripture came to me real strong. Into my mind, I said, Lord, I'm not experiencing that. We had already talked to my mother-in-law. We were going to borrow enough money for her to buy a new radiator for her car. And I said, Lord, I'm not experiencing that. And I had no more thought that, and the phone rang. And a friend of mine, I picked up the phone, a friend of mine called, and he said, I'm going around the curve right here by your house, and I felt the Lord told me to call you and just to tell you he loves you and tell you that I love you. And I said, well, thank you for that, you know. So I went to work that evening, and I went to work, and the same person came to where I was working. You'd know, some of you know him if I told you who he was. But he came to work. He said, well, actually, when I went around that curve, the Lord spoke to me and told me to give you some money. And he gave me, I don't remember exactly, $300 or $400, but I remember this, that it was the exact amount to the very penny that we needed to buy me a new pair of glasses, to buy a new radiator for the car, to buy my sons and each a new pair of pants. And the Lord didn't. You know, the Lord provided. And we went through that, and we've gone through some financial difficulties and some things that we've learned through this. And you want to share what? And I'll just share some of the things. I've started for, the Lord brings us, looking back, I can see that the Lord has brought us through things to teach us things. If you'll be teachable, and if you'll have a heart towards me and not turn back from me, then I'll tear you down and rebuild you. And some of the things that we felt the Lord began to teach us through this, we wrote them down here, a list is, first of all, he taught us not to be lazy. And actually, I wasn't lazy. I've worked, when I retired, June the 1st, I would have worked 46 years, paid in Social, and I don't remember ever missing a day of work for being sick or for anything besides a vacation day. I took off a few days early, you know. But my view was that I'll work my 8 hours, and after that, my time's mine. But in order to care for our family, that was no longer an option just to do that. So we began to not to be quite so lazy. And this is Rossie. This is both of us, you know, that, like I say, she took in ironing, and she...
Yeah. What he's saying is that before we were Christians, he thought you put in 8 hours and that was it. But afterwards, he would work whatever he had to provide for his family. If it was in 24 hours, he would work 24 hours.
And the Lord also, another thing we thought the Lord began to teach us is to be more conservative in our spending. We always kind of watched our debt. You know, we didn't buy a lot of toys and run up. But the Lord began to teach us to be more conservative. Now, we didn't know any of this at the time. We're looking back, you know, and seeing where the Lord brought us to and what he felt he taught us. And he taught us how to handle finances. He taught us how to handle our finances with more wisdom. You know, like I said before, Rossie doesn't think I'm worth full price for anything, you know. But he began to teach us that. And another thing that was very difficult, this was probably one of the most difficult things he taught us, was how to receive. Because we were proud. We didn't realize it at the time, but we were proud. Hard to receive $5. Hard to receive when you're proud. But anyway, that's some of the things and we've been through a whole lot more things that we're not going to share tonight. I'll let Rossie finish this up.
We've been through a lot of the finance things, and Ronnie, after he worked at the school board for a while, several years as custodian, well, the railroad did call him back, and that's where he works today. Donnie still works there too, but he got laid off again at the railroad. But you know, that time, because of the things we had learned the first time, we actually saved money, and he wasn't bringing. I mean, he was drawing his unemployment and things, but because we had learned how to handle the money, how to spend, sell items, couponing, all the different things that we had learned, through the years, that during that time, the second time he was laid off, we were actually able to put money in the bank. For the first time, it was, hopefully you would have enough money day by day, but God was faithful, and he did provide those things. We've gone through other things. I've gone through some health problems that we've had to walk through. I had back surgery years ago, and there was 6 weeks I couldn't get off the floor. I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't take care of my family. I couldn't cook. Ronnie had to do more at that time, and God led us to a wonderful surgeon. I had back surgery, and I have no limitations, and things have been fine since then. Almost 6 years ago, I had breast cancer. And God took us through all that, and God's been faithful. And that's one of the things I want y'all to realize, that we learned early that from Matthew, that if you seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, all these things will be added unto you. If he cares for the birds and the flowers, how much more he cares for us? And it was seeking God. We would get $40. Somebody give us, as your parents did a great job, Rick and Debbie did, give God $4. If you got, and God was so faithful during times. Donnie and Susie had the same thing. We'd come home, and there was a 40-pound box of laundry detergent on your, front porch. I mean, at the time, I didn't know who did it, and now I do, But, at the things, and you would find things. It was just amazing that when God, and God has now let us at times help people the same way we've been helped. And, if we are listening to God, he's going to let us help some people like that. There are some people that need help. And things, and I think God uses those for all of us. And there are times that we have to learn not to be lazy. We have to work. There are things we have to do, But there are people that are doing the best they can that need help. And God wants us to help them. So, and the other thing is that give us this day our daily bread. Give us this day. God's going to provide for us daily. I'm not, don't worry about tomorrow and the next day, because it has its own troubles, So, and on that daily bread, that doesn't mean just food. That means whatever your need is for that day, that God will meet your needs daily. So, and we learned that God is faithful. We learn through those. Every trial you go through, everything you go through is for your benefit. We don't always, it's not seeming like it as we go through it, but we learn something through that. We grew spiritually, our character hopefully for the better too. And then the next time another trial comes through, well, I look back there and God was faithful. can believe that God's going to be faithful again, you know. So I am going to. So, whoops. Okay, I'm going to share something that I heard that was good. I'll get it in a minute. Just real quick, and it's about marriage, and it's from where our son in Alabama goes to church. As we've been doing this, I thought it was kind of neat. They've been doing a marriage thing down there at the same time. Yeah. And anyway, something I heard the other day is, you know, when we get married, one of the first things, you know, in our marriage ceremony, it's from this day forward. We hear that. You know, that's a God thing. Do you ever think about that? I mean, that really is. Because we learned in the Word that God's mercies are new every morning. So if you think about from this day forward, that day, from this day forward, is a new day. Every day you get up and start a new day. Just like, and God's mercies are new to you every morning on that day. So if you start it, I mean, we might have had a bad day yesterday, but today, from this day forward, things are going to look up. We're going to do better, you know, things. And so that is showing how great God's faithfulness is us by his mercies being new every morning. And in a marriage, God is my one, and my spouse is my two. I'm seeking God for myself, and I seek God for my husband. And he seeks God for himself, and he prays for me. And so we put our emphasis on God first, spouse two. And I want you to know something, this other thing that, you know, that we always talk about love as a choice. You know, choices lead, feelings follow. So think of that. I mean, love is a choice. Forgiveness is a choice. Most things in your walk with the Lord are a choice. You make that choice. It's going to lead. You walk in that, and then the feelings are going to come. We're done.
Thank you very much. No, awesome wisdom. One of the things you said that just stuck with me, and I really believe this. If God allows you to walk through something, it's for your benefit. That just really spoke to me, and I know that there's a lot of situations represented in this building tonight. Regardless of the place that you are, if God is allowing you to walk through it, he means it for your benefit and for your good. That's really good. Let's stand to our feet and pray tonight. Lord, we thank you that your word is true. We thank you that just like